Mr. Chairman, we are now recording the meeting and streaming live to YouTube, so you can begin whenever you're ready.
Right. Good morning and welcome everyone to the MetroPlan Orlando MAC meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is John Dowlis and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly for us in the room and those listening online. As we continue to meet in person, all committee members are required to be physically present here in the MetroPlan Orlando boardroom for purposes of achieving a quorum. Staff will continue to stream our meetings online for public access. To start a meeting, if we'll have a moment of silence, and then I'm going to ask Councilman Davitt to lead us in the pledge. If everyone stand. Thank you. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. This morning, I asked that everyone silence your phones, smart devices. I do ask that all committee members want to be recognized to speak and to activate your microphones before speaking and turning them back off when you are complete. There are two public comment points in the meeting. The first is for action items and the second is for comments of the general nature. You may provide your public comment in person, virtually, over Zoom, or in advance by email or phone message. We want this in all future meetings to be accessible to all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or phone. If you need accommodation to participate in the future, please contact MetroPlan Orlando, and we will have Ms. Larson for our agenda review.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. We do have one small change to the agenda, which is that Ms. Virginia Whittington will be presenting the Title VI Limited English Proficiency Plan instead of Mary Ann Horn as printed in the agenda. Ms. Whittington will also be doing the presentation virtually for us. A few announcements. We've had a series of workshops on electric vehicles over the past few weeks. Our fourth and final workshop will deal with grant applications and funding opportunities, and it will be held on November 12th over Zoom. So if that's of interest from you, you should have received some information from us already, but we can also make sure you get that Zoom information. Last week was FDOT's Mobility Week. And we were involved with several events, including the Bike 5 event on Saturday, October 26th, a multimodal workshop with links on October 29th, and the Blind Experience, which we do annually, on October 30th. It was another successful year, and we look forward to participating again next year. We also have a change in our meeting schedule to be aware of. The November 13th MetroPlan Orlando board meeting has been canceled, and the business from that agenda will be covered on the board's December 11th board meeting. And that concludes my comments. So I'm going to pass it over to Mike Wilson with the safety moment.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We've gone full circle back to doing another pedestrian safety month for October. And this time around, I want to talk a little bit about crosswalks. And before I get into that, just for the bigger picture, over the course of our 5 years of our Vision Zero study, we had about 78 pedestrian fatalities per year. For the first 6 months of this year, we are down 28%, which is huge and very good. We don't really understand why yet. We'll have to do some more digging to get a better picture. But that's positive. Also, serious injury crashes, about 160 a year. And of those, about 27% of the serious crashes involves pedestrians in crosswalks, and about 19% of the fatalities are in crosswalks. Looking deeper into crosswalks, when we look at those KSIs, About 45% happen at signalized intersections, another 42% at uncontrolled crossings where the driver is not facing a stop sign or a yield sign or a signal. And then only a small number happen where there is a stop sign. And fault is pretty evenly distributed between both motorists and pedestrians at the crossings. So key takeaways, for motorists, if you're stopped at a red light, preparing to make a right turn on red, make sure you look to the right because there are pedestrians who can be entering the crosswalk. If you're making if you're approaching a crosswalk that doesn't have a stop sign or a signal, you still have to yield to the pedestrian who has entered the crosswalk, irrespective of whether there's a flashing light or not. That crosswalk marking is the key. And also, if you're making a turn on a green ball or a flashing light, as opposed to a green arrow, then you have to yield to the pedestrians who are in those parallel crosswalks before you make your turn. For pedestrians, if you're at a signalized intersection, please push the button and wait for your walk signal, understanding that sometimes it's going to take a while for the signal cycle to turn. It's not going to happen immediately. But then, when we're looking at how we engineer those crossings, maybe sometimes it'd be good to have just an automatic walk signal rather than requiring the pedestrians to push a button. If you're crossing, try when you can to communicate with drivers. It's not always feasible if people are wearing sunglasses, tinted windows, it's nighttime, but when you can, try to make that effort. And before you step into the crosswalk, scan, make sure that you don't have approaching vehicles, and keep scanning as you continue across. So that's it for the safety moment. Also want to give you a brief update on our ongoing efforts with Vision Zero, even though the plan's adopted, but we have ongoing work. I want to talk about the demonstration projects that we are doing, one with each of the 3 counties. With Orange County, we're working on a pilot middle school bicycle program. It'll be an after-school program to take kind of a fun approach, but sneak some education in there along the way. In Osceola County, we're looking at a number of intersections where there are pedestrian crossing issues and looking at those more in detail and doing counts and behavioral observations and engineering assessments to figure out what's the best engineering approach for those intersections. And then in Seminole County, we're doing artificial intelligence to look at near-miss incidents using the existing signal system, which is already set up for computerized analysis. So it's just a matter of plugging in another software module. So we'll be able to get an idea of what's going on at those intersections in a more fine-grained way to see what those close calls are telling us. So that's our update for Vision Zero, and that's my report for today.
Thank you very much. I think we now have roll call.
Good morning. I'll ask all committee members to keep your microphones muted until call. Please say here or present. Davitt,
Present.
Sullivan for DeCiccio,
Present.
Dowless,
Present.
Foraker, Presley for Gardner,
Present.
Guthrie, Henson,
Here.
Kennedy, McCann, Ramos,
Present.
Sackett,
Present.
Sladig, Smith.
Present.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we have had requests for excused absences from Mayor Foraker, Commissioner Kennedy, and Mayor Sladig.
Do we have a motion to note and approve excuse absence? And we have a second. We have Commissioner Sackett for the motion, then Commissioner Smith with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted. All right, we'll now hear public comments on action items. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold public comments at 2 minutes or less. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. If you need accommodations to participate in the future, please contact Metro Plan Orlando. But before we ask that, we have a quorum. Okay, great. Do we have any joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
Mr. Chairman, no hands raised online.
Thank you so much. And do we have any members of the public attending in person that wish to make a public
I have not received any requests.
and any written comments?
No.
All right, very thorough. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Let's see. All right, we're going into the agency and reports, partner updates. And so we have from FDOT, Ms. Beckman.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman and everyone. It's nice to see everyone again. It feels like it's been a hot minute since we've been here. A little bit has happened in the interim. We've had some weather incidences. And so I'm going to take my time today to very briefly update you on District 5's response to our hurricanes Helene and just completely blanked out on the Milton. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sorry, Milton, I apologize. So basically we had a situation where we had our entire district hit by Hurricane Milton, and the damage and the flooding that was caused was not as bad as we thought it was going to be. And it wasn't as bad as D1 or D7. They did have some more substantial damage. But we did have a few washouts. We had some issues around A1A and Flagler Beach and Ormond Beach that we were able to quickly get in and work on, as well as a very substantial washout of 1792 in Orange City, just a little bit south down, further south than our district office. It did take us 5 days to repair that. If you get a chance to look at any of the pictures of that, I would highly encourage it. That washout was a decent size, and the fact that we were able to get that major thoroughfare for our residents reopened within 5 days was a good feat. So it's a tragedy that had happened, but we're glad that we were able to repair it in such a quick manner. The biggest thing for us was obviously there was some flooding issues that happened. We also had some slope erosions down around World Drive and I-4, some retention pond and outfall failures, but all in all, we had a big debris cleanup. The recovery coming back from that has been substantial. We were able to be blessed by having some crew members from D2 as well as D6 come up, District 2 and District 6. So that's the Jacksonville and the Miami area coming up to assist us. Usually D5 is one where we try to be part of our one FDOT family and we send our crew members out to help others, and this time they had to come help us. So we were able to double our team size. We had 61 crew members from D2 alone coming down to help us, as well as those from D6. And we had 50 dump trucks, 14 front-end loaders, 13 skid steers, and 17 grapple trucks. We had our ops centers all working 7 days a week to complete our first pass of debris cleanup. We are almost completed with our second pass of debris cleanup. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this, our first pass of debris cleanup garnered 26,000, almost 27,000 cubic yards of debris cleanup just on the first pass. Second passes were just shy of about 4,500 at this point. Where does Metro Plan area fall into that? Orange County had a total of about 1,000 cubic yards picked up between the two passes. Osceola about 815 and Seminole about 500. I was speaking earlier, Volusia County was hit probably the hardest when it came to debris cleanup. In comparison to the 1,000 or so, 500 to 1,000 for Orange, Osceola, and Seminole, Volusia County has had almost 12,000 cubic yards of debris cleanup, and it's still ongoing. We still have people out in both Brevard and the Volusia Flagler areas doing debris cleanup still at this point, and hoping to wrap that up soon. So on top of that, I do have lane closure information. If you are interested, I'm happy to talk with you about that. We can speak after the meeting. And unless you have any questions, that concludes my report for today.
Are there any questions for Ms. Beckman? All right, great. Thanks very much. And next we have Ms. Witten with Links. Welcome.
Good morning, thank you. Lynx's average ridership is still just under 60,000 per day. We had our highest ridership day since COVID on September 3rd, and that was 64,204 trips. We also responded to Hurricane Milton. We had to suspend bus service for just under 24 hours, and we also provided some of the emergency operations trips and trips to shelters within the 3-county area. We participated with FDOT last week in Mobility Week. In coordination with FDOT, we hosted the afternoon multimodal workshop, and there was a tri-transit free day for Lynx and Sunrail. If you use it now or just wanted to see what it was like and have never used it before, you could get on for free and take a trip. And then last Friday, we hosted a workshop with AARP with their volunteers. So it was kind of like a train the trainer. We took some of their volunteers out on the fixed route system and taught them how to use it so they could go back and train some of their participants. Let's see, we also, Lynx received the Florida Public Transportation Association Award for last year's public service bus. And we will have our holiday bus starting December 2nd. So if you see it out and driving around and Santa is driving, it is a free ride that day. And Lynx will also be celebrating 20 years of Lynx Central Station on November 19th. So, yeah. That's my update, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thanks very much. And now we have from Florida Turnpike, Mr. Fine, welcome.
Morning, committee members. Ciazi Fine with the Turnpike. So no real updates for today. Just a reminder that I'll be back in December to present the Turnpike's tentative work program. That's our 5-year of all our work that we have programmed and we want to get done. But with that being said, that is the end of my report.
All right, there any questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much. We have action items. We have 4 action items. The first one is approval of our minutes. Do we have any edits or changes? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Mayor Henson, a second from Commissioner Sackett. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted. All right, we now go to FDOT Amendment 2025-2029 TIP, and we have Mr. Sartorio. Welcome.
Morning, Chairman and committee members. This morning I have 2 TIP amendments for you. And additional information on these amendments is located in tab 2 of your agendas. The first amendment will increase ACSS funds and local funds in fiscal year 2025 for construction of the Buenaventura Boulevard Complete Streets project from Florida Parkway to East Osceola Parkway. And the second amendment is for a GOA project to add a new consolidated rental car facility and associated roadway improvements. This amendment will include financing from a federal TIFIA loan. And this is a bit of a unique request because in order to secure the loan, the project must first be included in the TIP, whereas typically we don't include projects in the TIP until the funding has been awarded. We are including the project into the TIP proactively with caveats for purposes of planning consistency. With that being said, unless there are any questions, we're asking for your recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
And we have a second, Mayor McCann. All right, all in favor, is this voice vote or do we do, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted. And we are now on to Title VI, Non-Discrimination and Limited English Proficiency LEP plan with Ms. Horn.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Virginia Whittington, and I'll be presenting this morning for Mary Ann. Mr. Chair and members, thank you so much for accommodating my request to present this remotely today. I had a family emergency and couldn't attend in person, so I really appreciate the accommodation today. Mr. Chair, before I begin, with your permission, I'd like to let the Municipal Advisory Committee know of a staffing change. Is that in order?
Anything for you, Virginia.
Thank you so much. It's good to have friends in high places. Just wanted to call to your attention, the staffing change. Miss Cynthia Lambert is no longer with Metro Plan Orlando. We are grateful for the 19 years that Cynthia spent with Metro Plan Orlando, and although her decision was not one that we wanted to hear, we do wish her well in whatever her next chapter is. And we're grateful that she did leave us in really good shape as an organization. She raised the bar in our communications and public outreach work. And she also left us in good shape in terms of succession planning. And I'm pleased to announce today that Marianne Horn, who would have been here presenting this today, has been promoted to Public Information Manager. Marianne has been with us for more than 12 years, and her exceptional work made her ideal to slide right into this position. And we look forward to the work that she did with Cynthia, alongside Cynthia, continuing to help our organization be upheld as a model throughout the state. So when you see Marianne, I hope that you will congratulate her. She was out on vacation today, which is the reason that I'm presenting. Marianne is, Mr. Chair, she is the project manager for this work. And so at the end of the presentation, if you all have some really hard questions, I will be forced to interrupt her vacation and get answers for you. I can handle all of the easy ones and hopefully receive your recommendation of approval this morning. So you're probably each familiar with our Title VI non-discrimination and LEP or limited English proficiency plans through your own work with your municipalities or by virtue of your work with us here at Metro Plan Orlando. Because of the size of the document, there was a link included in your agenda packets that takes you to the draft of the document, which is currently up on our website. And also in your agenda packet is a board action fact sheet, which explains to you how and why we do this. On this slide here, it shows that as we update the plan, we also take a look at the demographics relating to underserved populations in Central Florida. Here you'll see that we have people in the region who experience challenges and barriers to full participation in our process for myriad reasons. Economics, do they own their own vehicle? Physical disabilities, age, whether they are younger or older, are just some of those reasons. But our goal is to ensure a process that is open to everyone who wishes to participate, and that the barriers that they may experience that would ordinarily prohibit participation are eliminated to the maximum extent possible. Next slide, please. We have a long history of non-discrimination in our organization, and two important aspects of our non-discrimination plan are Title VI and limited English proficiency. Next slide, please. The Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits and protects people regardless of their immigration status from discrimination in programs that receive federal assistance. And it is incumbent upon us that we comply with federal non-discrimination requirements. And I must say that we seek ways to go above and beyond just what's required. In addition to demonstrating our compliance with Title VI, our plan not only details how we will serve our communities, but also outlines the ways in which we'll include traditionally underserved and underrepresented communities and people who are without strong English language skills into the process. Our limited English proficiency plan provides guidance for engaging people who speak English less than very well. It explains resources that we make available. The plan includes a self-assessment of how we engage people who speak languages other than English, as well as an assessment of our programs or services. And over the years, we have expanded upon this guidance to include not just the Spanish language, but also Haitian Creole. A language assistance guide identifies the region's language needs and lists that provide resources such as translation services and interpretation tools that are available to provide meaningful access to our programs and services and our activities. You know, if we want people to participate in this process, we need to ensure that the availability of resources that help them to understand what it is that we're asking them to participate in. So some of those resources include translation of written materials and other information that in their preferred language. And if you visit our website, you'll notice that there is also a language button that is up in the top right-hand corner where people who visit our website can easily translate our website into their native language or their preferred language with the click of a button on that toolbar. Our new 2050 MTP brochure, which you should have a copy at your places, is one of the most recently published pieces that we have, and it's an example of a print piece that we've translated into multiple languages, currently into Spanish and Haitian Creole, in addition to English. And again, this is an ongoing process for us to ensure that language is not one of those barriers to participation. Next slide. I think I may be behind a couple of slides here. Yeah, one more slide, Lisa. All right. So finally, another important aspect of the plan is the identification of transportation underserved communities or TUCs. These are places where people live and are identified as more than likely to face those barriers that I mentioned earlier. Identifying these areas help us evaluate potential gaps in the transportation system. And we utilize tools to identify these areas. And two of those tools, one is the Equitable Transportation Community Explorer tool. And we also use the USDOT's Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or CJES. I want to make sure to note that these are not the only places where people experience disadvantages in our region. However, these are the communities where the tool shows us that there is a likelihood that people who live there will experience some type of barrier. Next slide. This is a quick overview of one of our maps that came as a result of using these tools. The areas that you see in green depict how many people and how much of our region is impacted. And I want to call attention to the footnote that is on this screen at the bottom of the slide. There is an explanation there of an outlier, which is a large portion in the southeastern part of Osceola County. Today, this area is primarily agricultural, it's ranch and preservation land. However, we know that the character of this tract is likely going to change over the years. And so right now, while it is quite remote and there are several limitations for transportation for the folk who do live there, and yes, people do live there, because of its unique character, it is going to show up, and we will keep it on the map so that we are able to track this tract. And it is currently not included, though, in the overall calculations because we understand that it would significantly skew the data. And so for now, we identify it, but we do not include it. So with that brief overview, Mr. Chair, again, unless there are questions, we are requesting your recommendation of approval by the Metro Plan Orlando Board when they meet in December.
Thank you, Ms. Whittington. Are there any tough questions for her? Oh, we have one.
Tough questions are
Marty.
for Mary Ann.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dallas. I noticed that the program welcomes participation regardless of race, color, national origin, gender, age, religion, disability, or family status. Could that otherwise be stated as diversity, equity, and inclusion? Or are we allowed to put that in this statement of purpose?
Well, thank you for that question. The definition that you see there is the definition that is used in federal law for the Title VI non-discrimination. We are able to bring your comment to the Metro Plan Orlando Board as they seek to approve the plan at their next meeting and maybe put a separate qualifier in there. But what is listed is that as specifically called out in law.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve? Oh, who just, Commissioner Sackett and second? Oh, okay.
Second here.
Okay, Ramos and Sackett. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you very much, Ms. Whittington. We are now, next on is the draft 2025 board and committee meeting calendar, tab 4. Ms. Larson.
Yes, and before I get into that, I have a quick point of order from action item B, the FDOT amendment. Prior to the meeting, Councilmember Davitt let us know that he would have to recuse himself from the vote, and he didn't vote. So, but we will have that on record. And
Okay, just note that for the record then that Commissioner Davitt recused himself from that vote due
Yes.
to a employment conflict. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Larson.
Onto the draft 2025 board committee meeting calendar, which is up on the screen in front of you, and it's also in tab 4. You can see the meetings here for all of the Metro Plan Orlando board and committees, including the TDLCB and also our 2025 technical workshop schedules. So just a quick few notes here. As you can see, some of the dates are moved to accommodate for holidays. That most impacts us for our would-be July meeting. Instead, we have 2 meetings in June. We did the same thing this year, where we had a MAC meeting the first week of June, and then we also had a MAC meeting the last week of June to accommodate for the July 4th holiday.
And those are all the dates in red.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah.
Great.
You can also see them with the 1 next to them. And then this doesn't impact us, but there are a few meetings that had a date adjusted due to a meeting conflict. And then also the Metro Plan Orlando board meeting on July 9th has a different start time at 8 a.m. We've been doing this for the past couple of years, and it has been effective. So that is what we have right now. If you have any comments, please let us know.
Questions or comments about the calendar? All right, hearing none. Would you like? Okay,
Yes,
and we
seeking
would
approval.
like to welcome a motion for approval. Mayor Henson, second. Commissioner Davitt, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted.
Thank you very much.
Right, moving on. We now are going to presentations and status updates. And first up, we have Miss Laurent. Welcome, Taylor.
Good morning. So I'm Taylor Laurent, providing another update on our 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And I'd like to start off with a topic that we haven't spoken too much about yet, but it's time to bring it to the forefront, and that's our public engagement. So we've had 3 presentations at the time I wrote these slides that we had already made out in the public for outreach events. We've since had 3 more, and you'll be hearing more about those in my presentation next cycle. But we are actively working on collecting feedback every time that we go out to these different engagement events. As of, again, the time writing these slides, with those first 3 events, we had more than 60 in-person interactions and 46 surveys completed to help inform the development of our 2050 MTP. So I know many of us, including myself, are curious what those results are. So those are now included as part of your regular MTP status updates that are part of your agenda packets. You'll see each one with the results for each event, the results to all of our surveys, So any of the feedback we're receiving, you can also take back and use in your communities as well. So we have another about 6 to 7 events scheduled that haven't already occurred. And I'm expecting more to occur over the next several months as we work towards continuing the 2050 MTP. There will be a lot more coming along in that. In terms of our technical work, we are continuing our coordination with the Department of Transportation's Central Florida Regional Planning Model Team. And we're performing a secondary review of the base year socioeconomic data, so that population and housing data for the base year of the model. We submitted our comments just last week, so we're anticipating to see the revisions completed soon and also start looking at that horizon year for 2050. What are those forecasts that we'll be looking at for that transportation model? We're continuing forward with our congestion management process updates as well. We're currently in the end game of that project, looking at potential targets to work towards achieving through the congestion management process and looking to round out and complete that work by the end of this year. We've also completed a draft regional freight network, which was developed and refreshed as part of our 2050 plan. And that's under technical review right now. Many of your teams submitted comments to us to help refine and define that regional freight network. So we appreciate their active engagement with that. And then we have several other technical reports that are in that final stage, developing and crafting those recommendations and strategies to directly incorporate into the 2050 MTP. That includes our health, housing, environmental stewardship, resilience, and financial resources estimations work. And then we are also coming to the completion of our needs assessment work as well. So this is something that we've been working on again for the past 6+ months. We've completed all of our modal evaluations, which I've listed up on the slide for reference. And we've coordinated with each of your local teams, local staff, through a series of about 60 meetings so far. And we're looking to have another 30 over these past 2 weeks and next week as well, as we work to refine these lists and make sure that the needs that we're identifying, and now at the point of reviewing that final draft needs list, are the ones we are ready to close the book on and say, this is our transportation to-do list for 2050 and beyond. We're asking for comments on those draft lists by next Friday, November 15th. So if you have any comments or questions about that, or if your team has raised them to you, please coordinate with them or reach out to me so we can work on completing that needs assessment to move forward with the development of our MTP. So in terms of some of our recent meetings, we had our MTP technical workshop on October 17th, another meeting that was rescheduled due to Hurricane Milton. We're very grateful for everyone who was able to tune in and participate in that discussion as well. As a quick recap, that did include a detailed dive into a lot of our ongoing efforts at the moment. That includes our regional freight needs assessment, so how that draft network came to be, what we're working on in terms of the integration of health and transportation planning, looking at those housing and transportation strategies, the update on our financial resources estimations, and an overview and beginning the conversation about our prioritization process and the draft methodology that we'll be using for the 2050 MTP. So if you're curious about that, we do have the recording published up on our YouTube channel. But for prioritization, I want to take a little bit of time to go through that process with you today. So that's going to be one of the very key and critical elements as we continue to move forward with the MTP. So I mentioned the needs assessment, and that's what I really affectionately refer to as our transportation to-do list for the next 25+ years. When we look at that to-do list, we need a method to figure out which one of those projects goes first. And that's where the prioritization methodology comes in. So we want to make sure that we're working towards and implementing projects that support the transportation goals and objectives that we developed earlier this year collaboratively for the MTP. So when we talk about this, you're going to hear 3 key terms repeated over and over for me. The first one is goal area weighting, and that's how we organize and center the entire prioritization methodology around those MTP goals and objectives. Then we have the evaluation criteria, which is how we measure each of those goals. And I'll talk more about that in a few slides. And the same with the criteria scoring. So that's how we determine a high need versus a low need. So how are we measuring those evaluation criteria? So in terms of the overall process, this will be very similar to what we did back in 2045, with the intention to simplify it and make sure that the criteria we're using are really catered towards the projects that we're going to be including within our 2050 plan. That's why this is being developed in parallel to our needs assessment. So they're speaking to each other, but being developed independently. So that first area that I mentioned, that first term, the goal area weighting, was completed, developed using a survey that we did back in August to weigh the importance of our different goal areas against each other. So those 5 goal areas were safety, reliability, connectivity, community, and prosperity. Based on all the responses that we received, which compared and basically asked, is goal area 1 more important than goal area 2? And we went through and asked those qualitative questions and compared each of those different goal areas against each other, all those combinations, to come up with this first draft result. So that came out with safety receiving the highest number of responses, with 35% saying that was the most important factor, followed by connectivity with 25%, then reliability with 20%, and then community and prosperity with 10% each. So in total, that adds up to a total possible priority score of 100 possible points. So that's step 1. How do we evaluate each of those 5 primary goal areas? Step 2 is selecting those evaluation criteria. So how are we going to measure safety, for example? Step 3, once we've picked out each of those evaluation criteria, is to define how we're measuring that evaluation criteria. What determines a high need and what is a low need? Does it earn all of the points or just some of them for that particular item? And once we figure out the evaluation criteria and their scoring, then we apply them to the modal programs that you see listed here on the slide. And this is just like we did back in 2045. The only difference this time around is that we have more specific categories that we're considering, and we've added a safety and Vision Zero category this time around as well. And there will be a lot more to come on this. We've had a more detailed discussion with the Technical Advisory Committee this past October 25th to really dive into the selection of those evaluation criteria and talk about the scoring thresholds. So we'll have an updated version for you to be able to look at starting with your meeting next month. But overall, the start of this prioritization discussion is really the sign that we're getting to the halfway point with our 2050 MTP and marking the start of our infrastructure investment decision-making process, which is where we have completed the needs assessment. We know what order we're addressing those projects. Then we start bringing in the last element of the discussion, and that's the financial and budgetary piece, as we work towards developing a cost feasible plan next calendar year. So a lot more to come on all these topics, but overall we're on track to be able to complete and adopt the 2050 MTP by December of 2025. So thank you for your time this morning. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions? No? Thank you very much. All right, next we have the Regional Traffic Signal Retiming Program, something I think we all hear a lot about. Ms. Bauk, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Laura Bauk. I'm here to provide a summary of our findings from a before and after signal retiming evaluation for the fiscal year 22-23 retiming program. This is an evaluation that we complete for every year of our retiming program, where we look at various performance metrics before and after the corridors are retimed. We calculate the benefit cost ratio for the program and just generally evaluate the value of continuing to fund this program. We've been funding signal retiming here in the Metroplein Orlando region for more than 16 years now, because it brings with it a variety of benefits, including improving traffic flow, reducing vehicular delay at our intersections, and depending on the goals of the specific goals of the retiming for a corridor, it can reduce speeding and improve that comfort, the experience for our bicyclists and pedestrians. So for the fiscal year 22-23 retiming program, we retimed 24 corridors and 1 independent intersection. The next few slides just show the locations of those retimed corridors. So in Orange County, we retimed 17 corridors. In Seminole County, we retimed 4 corridors and that 1 individual intersection I mentioned before. And in Osceola County, we retimed 3 corridors. Thinking about the data that we use for this evaluation, that has gone through something of an evolution. When we first started the program, we were sending folks out in cars and doing floating car runs to evaluate the travel time savings before and after the retiming. And then in 2011, moved on to start using Bluetooth data. In Seminole County, there are a number of permanent Bluetooth stations that we use if there's a retiming on the corridors where the stations are located. And then for other corridors, we would put down temporary Bluetooth counters, and that continued for about a decade. And then during the pandemic, we had to pivot and we started to use connected vehicle data. Initially, we were using Wejo data. We used that for a few years. And then when they went out of business last year, we had to look for a new data source, and we turned to TomTom data. Since this was a new data source for us last year, we did do a validation where we looked at the outputs from TomTom and compared those to both the permanent Bluetooth stations that I mentioned in Seminole County, and we also compared it against that Wejo data that we had previously validated when we were using it. This slide sort of summarizes our findings, but in general, what we found were any differences that we saw were within the margin of error, and we felt that the data was good to use. So we moved forward with using that TomTom data for evaluation this year. As I mentioned, each year we looked at a number of performance metrics, and I'm going to sort of talk through what our findings were for the 22-23 retiming program now. We found that on the 24 corridors that were retimed, 88% of them showed shorter travel times following the signal retiming. We found in terms of looking at reliability along those corridors, it was basically the same before and after. About 80% of the corridors showed reliable travel times before and about the same after. We did see significant reductions in vehicle emissions and fuel consumption needed along those corridors. For that individual intersection that I mentioned, we did see less intersection delay following the retiming. And then looking at all of the intersections along the retimed corridors, at about 17% of those intersections, we saw a reduction in pedestrian delay. So there was some multimodal benefit as well, which is nice to see. And looking at the benefit cost summary, we have been calculating our benefit cost summary basically the same way for the life of this program, where we look at the annual travel time decrease. So when we annualize the travel time decreases along the corridors that were retimed, it was about 280,000 hours for the year. And then we multiply that by that travel time cost savings at the bottom of the slide. That got us to about $18.1 million in cost savings. The total cost for the program that year was 1.1 million, which got us to our BC ratio of 16.4. This slide shows the BC ratio over time. As you can see, it fluctuates. It just sort of depends on which corridors are chosen. For some corridors, there's sort of only so fast, only so much travel time savings that you can realize as volumes go up, that sort of thing. This year we had a good year, and so we have a pretty high BC ratio. And then in thinking about signal retiming, it really is a balancing act of competing priorities. For looking to reduce those travel times along a corridor, you know, there can be some impacts on speeds and speeding. There can be impacts on the experience of our bicyclists and pedestrians. These are all things that we do try and manage with our local agency partners. And of course, that's something that the retiming consultants are looking for as they do those retimings. I will say that moving forward, there will be an increased focus on using signal retiming, or at least evaluating signal retiming as a means of managing speeds. That's something that's in our Vision Zero safety action plan. So you'll be hearing more about that coming up. I will say that we did look at, in that same safety vein, a couple of additional sort of mini analyses this year that we were able to do with the data that we used. Since we were using TomTom, we were able to look at speeds before and after. And so along each of the corridors that were retimed, we did look at both average and 85th percentile speed, and essentially saw that there was not a significant change in sort of average speeds, or the 85th percentile for that matter. Before and after, there was an increase of 1 mile per hour for the average travel speed and a decrease of 0.2 miles per hour for that 85th percentile speed. So we looked at it a little bit different way. And on this second slide, it shows looking at not the entire corridors that were retimed, but just those intersection influence areas to see if we saw any changes in speeds there. And again, not really. This was a sort of a limited sample size, and so we may expand this moving forward, but we didn't see a significant difference in speeding, and this is a metric that we'll continue to look at for next year. Another thing that we looked at this year was distracted driving. You've seen a lot of Vision Zero presentations over the last several months, and distracted driving is an issue here in the region and sort of throughout the country. And so we chose 5 intersections that were along the corridors that were retimed for this fiscal year. And we sent out a team to look at the first 5 vehicles in the queue for all of the each of the 5 intersections, all of the approaches, to look for distracted driving behaviors. They were out there for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, AM and PM peak for that week. And they were just looking at those first 5 drivers, and we were looking to see, A, if there were distracted behaviors, and then if they were impacting operations, if we were impacting the headways, how quickly drivers were reacting once the lights changed. And what we found were, of those that were observed, about 51% of drivers showed distracted driving behaviors of various sorts, many on their phones, some eating and drinking or talking to others in the car, some other behaviors that we saw. And we noticed that about 60% of those distracted driving behaviors persisted into the green phase. That said, we did not see any specific correlation between the distracted driving and impacts on the headways on those operations. Again, another small sample size. This was sort of a proof of concept if we could do it, but that was the finding from these 5 intersections. Since we have lots and lots of great crash data, we decided to take a look at the crash data at those same 5 intersections from 2018 to 2022, which is the same analysis period we've been using for our Vision Zero work. And what we found was about 51% of the distracted driving vehicles showed 51% of the distracted driving vehicle crashes out of the 637 vehicle. Actually, this is an old slide. That should say 16% of the crashes were showed distracted driving behaviors. So take from that what you will. Again, another small sample size, but you can see some of the behaviors that were noted on the crash reports. And I will note that this 16% is probably low because we only counted those crashes as being distracted driving related if the officer was able to observe the distracted driving behavior. So something else that we'll continue to look at, distracted driving is one of the behaviors that we saw as we were doing our crash profiles. So we're certainly looking at ways to see where we're seeing that in the region and what we can do about it. So we'll continue to do that. And that's everything that I have for my presentation today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone? Well, Marty?
Thank you, John. The benefit cost calculations.
Yes.
One thing this provides is a reduction in pollution and reduction in fuel consumption. Is that built into the benefit cost calculation?
It's not right now. The benefit cost calculation at the moment is based only on travel time savings because we have the measure of the cost of time that we're able to multiply it by to get that number. But we were actually just revising the scope for the evaluation for next year. And we're starting to think about ways that we can expand upon. Obviously, there are other benefits to the program. It's what we can monetize for that benefit cost calculation. So we'll be looking at ways that we can wrap in some of the other metrics.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Commissioner Davitt?
Just for a quick question, is your group or do you know of anyone using AI to do real-time analysis and real-time adjustments of signal retiming?
We are not yet in the region as far as I'm aware, and I'm not aware of anyone doing that, but I will look into that. So good question.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have bicycle safety and related topics. Mr. Wilson, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning again. Over the past couple of years, we've received a lot of questions from CAC, from your committee and others, in topics regarding bicycling that I haven't really been able to get into in depth. And so I figured it was overdue for that. And I've been at this for over 30 years now doing bike and pedestrian planning. And so I think I bring a unique perspective on that. And what I'm going to attempt to do here is to distill my 30 years of experience into 20 minutes. Let's see how I do. To give you an idea of where I'm coming from, even before my 30 years working here, for 20 years prior to that, I was already using a bike for transportation. I literally started with my first paper route at age 10 in 1970. And I've been biking to work at least a couple of days a week, every job I've ever held since then. And so I've got a lot of miles of on-road experience, a lot of very practical experience. I've also really focused on education, a lot more so than my peers, I'd say, when it comes to bicycle planning. And I've also focused very heavily on bicycle crash typing, which I'll get into later in the presentation. I'm going to start off talking about bicycling for transportation. What does that look like? And what are the key factors that come into that? A question that had come up a couple times in CAC is, what about the difference between biking for recreation versus transportation? Well, I like to look at it this way. Recreation is going somewhere to bike, whereas transportation is biking to go somewhere. And what that means from a route choice standpoint is that for recreation, we choose based on comfort and scenery, whereas for transportation, we base it on distance and access. But what doesn't change are the rules of movement, the way the traffic system works, the human factors that are at play, and physics don't change, right? But the factors that I see coming into play that I've seen over the years, trip distance is really important, especially trips that are under 2 miles or under 20 minutes. We see that around the world. And so when we have a denser environment, we're going to see more bike trips. Street connectivity is related to that. When you have a good network with redundancy, that tends to also reduce the trip distance. It also helps cyclists to avoid busy arterials. They can ride on parallel, quieter streets. Auto parking supply. If you look at European cities, they note this specifically in their planning, that if they can suppress automobile parking supply and keep the price up, that actually encourages mode shift to other modes, including bicycling. In the US, college age population is really important. When we see cities that have bigger college populations, they have much higher bicycle commute rates. Income, not surprisingly, is also a factor that on the lower end, there's a little bit of increase, interesting on the very high end as well, but it's mostly in lower income areas. Humidity is something I looked at, looking at some city by city climate data, and found that in the drier western cities, we see twice as much bicycle commuting because the sweat factor is just that much lower. And then terrain is another important factor. A lot of variability in this, but obviously hills, comes into play, and you can imagine that compounding with humidity and distance and all that. So I think those are the things that are the real key indicators of when you're going to see more cycling. I want to dive into that a little bit deeper, and these probably are the two cities, our city of Orlando compared to city of Amsterdam, probably the two most divergent places in the world if you're going to talk about bicycle transportation. Look at the difference in density, right? And I'm just talking about the city, the municipal boundaries here. It gets trickier if you're trying to do the whole metro area. 5 times the density in the city of Amsterdam. And what does that look like on the ground? Well, if you look at a typical street 2 miles from the city center in Amsterdam, that's what you see on the left. And here's a typical city street in Orlando, 2 miles from city center. And so keep in mind that, that 2 mile trip, and the average Dutch bicycle trip is under 2 miles. It's 1.5 miles. We have our own local data now. We've done over 80 count locations, and these are just looking at counts where there's a parallel roadway, not independent paths. But you see here that irrespective, there's not a whole lot of difference between corridors that have no bike facility, that have a bike lane, or that have a shared use path. They're all under 1%. And the shared use path is only up a little bit higher because the relative number of car trips on the adjacent roadways is quite a bit lower. We can also look at this over time. We have the US Census Journey to Work data going back to 1990. And so in 1990, we had virtually 0 miles of bikeways in our metro area. And our for the metro area is 0.6% of commuters were traveling by bike, and 0.9 for the city of Orlando. And you can see the trend here. We've actually dropped You know, so now that we have over 600 miles of bike lane and over 200 miles of shared use path, and the census data is showing quite a bit lower. So moving on to crashes. And the factors that I've seen here in my analysis over the years, number one is the conflict frequency. What do I mean by that? The number of intersections and driveways per mile as you're traveling along, particularly commercial driveways, because 95% of our crashes involve turning and crossing movements. Either the bicyclist or the motorist is crossing, the path of the other. Motor vehicle volumes. We had an interesting natural experiment with that during COVID. We saw a significant decrease in crashes, even though cycling increased, but there were so fewer cars on the road, especially in the commercial corridors. Not many cars coming out of the Burger King drive-through, right? So a big reduction there. Motor vehicle speed. This impacts the crashes that involve a cyclist crossing the road, just in the same way that when a pedestrian is crossing the road. And it also affects the overtaking motorist crashes, especially at night. And then bicyclist direction. What we found from our analysis is that cyclists facing traffic, irrespective of whether they're on the road or on a bike lane or on a sidewalk or a shared use path, their risk is 5 times greater going facing traffic than going with the flow of traffic. Bicycle speed is another important and underappreciated factor. The faster a cyclist is going, the greater the stopping distance they need. So if a motorist is crossing their path, they need more braking distance. The bicycle's lateral position is where we tend to put a lot of focus, right? We want to often move them off to the side. But the thing is that factor comes into play with all these other factors that when you have a lot of turning and crossing movements, the cyclist being off to the right is actually an aggravating risk factor. And then finally, visibility and conspicuity. So by visibility is things like the line of sight, can you see around that hedge? And then conspicuity, how visible is the bicyclist? Do they have lights and reflectors, et cetera? And that compounds again with all the other factors. So, all of these factors are interrelated and will have a profound impact on behavior and crash risk. And we can get fine-grained on this because we've been doing this bicyclist crash typing analysis for many years. So what crash typing does is it takes the details out of the crash report and distills them down into some really essential data points of what type of location is an intersection, a mid-block. What's the position of the bicyclist? Are they in a travel lane, a bike lane, et cetera? And what direction are they going with versus against the flow of traffic, or are they crossing the roadway? And then the bicyclist or motorist action. Are they turning, crossing, overtaking, et cetera? And while, fault kind of does come into play, what we're really interested in when we look at this is what are the key factors that are increasing or decreasing risk. So there are tons of different crash types, but I've sort of distilled them down into a handful to make it more manageable. The one that people tend to focus on the most is the overtaking motorist crash. But as you can see here, that's only 6% of our crashes. Motorist failure to yield, who's motorist turning or crossing, are about 60% of the crashes. And you can see that 76% of those involve a cyclist who's on a sidewalk or on a side path. And about another quarter of the crashes involve a bicyclist failure to yield, again, either turning or crossing the path of the motorist. And then, of course, there are always some others that are unusual or where we don't have enough information. Now, I'm going to step down, or should say step up to higher levels of injury. So this is for all injury levels. And this chart's going to change now to looking at KSIs. And we see that overtaking motorists is now increased to 10%. And the motorist failure to yield has dropped somewhat, and the bicyclist failure to yield is increasing. And then similarly, when we go up one more to fatalities, now we're at 22% of fatalities involving an overtaking motorist. And relatively few of those motorist failure to yield, because those tend to be slow speed. Motorists are moving at slow speed in those cases, while the bicyclist failure to yield is now half of the crashes because they're crossing the higher speed motorists. So, I think a key question, at least it's always been a question for me, is separation a solution? Well, from our count data, when we put our MyoVision cameras out, and we know that at least 70% of our bicyclists are already using a separated facility. That on most roads, cyclists are using a sidewalk, which is a separated facility. But then 76% of our crashes are happening there, and 61% of our serious bike crashes. And I think the reason why it's important to understand this relationship between speed and separation, again, it comes down to that braking distance and stopping distance. There's a lot going on in this chart, but I want to draw your attention to are the reddish, pinkish dots, and that represents the stopping distance and braking distance of an untrained bicyclist who has dual handbrakes. That's probably the most common thing that we'll see. And you can see there at the bottom of the chart, going from 25 miles an hour down to 8 miles an hour, just how much more stopping distance is needed. Now, for perception and reaction time, we're making the usual engineering assumption of 2.5 seconds. It may be less than that. But even if you just look at the braking distance, there's really a huge difference there. And so this is really important because, again, 60% of our crashes and 40% of our KSIs are happening at these types of locations. And when we look at the average speeds of bicyclists, which we were able to get from our MyoVision cameras, average sidewalk cyclists is going a little over 9 miles an hour. Side path cyclists closer to 12, similar to the bike lane. And then travel lane cyclists going 14 to 15 miles an hour. And that's the reason why the travel lane cyclists have a higher risk. It's because that when they get into a conflict, they need a lot more stopping distance. So they have a 56 or 100% higher crash risk, even though they're going 56% faster. When we get to the comparison of the travel lane to the bike lane, it's pretty much 1-to-1 that their risk goes up with their speed. Getting back to the overtaking motorist risk, here we were able to break down what happens in regards to speed and darkness and crash severity, again, based on our exposure data and our crash data. And what I want to call out on here, well, first off, noting that the bars in blue are the roads with 40 to 45 mile an hour posted speed. And the bars in orange are 25 to 35. And then you can see, all crashes versus the fatal and serious crashes. And we're just looking at streets without bike lanes or paved shoulders because there's a different risk factor there for overtaking crashes. But notice the difference between a daytime fatal and serious risk at 0.7 and a nighttime fatal and serious risk on a 40 to 45 mile an hour road. A 37-fold increase in crash risk for serious fatal and serious crashes. We're also able to look at crash risk overall by facility type. What was interesting here is that when we looked at side paths overall, you can see it had a somewhat lower crash risk. But within those side paths, those 5 paths that we looked at where we were able to get 10 years of crash data, 2 of them have very low crash risks, and I'm sorry, 3 of them had very low crash risks and 2 of them had quite high. That's because they had more intersections and driveways. So you can see there the 12 conflict points per mile compared to the low conflict point paths. What's interesting here is that these high conflict side paths had higher crash risk than roads with no facility. You can see they're 89 versus 36. And the reason for that is we have faster cyclists on these side paths compared to regular sidewalks. We're encouraging more cyclists facing traffic. And we've compounded that with the frequent conflict points. And this plays out in the serious crashes that you see on the right as well. Getting back to my comparison of Orlando and Amsterdam, you know, for many years, people were telling me, you got to go to Amsterdam, Europe, and you got to see the facilities there. And it's like, well, I finally did go a couple of years ago, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the bike facilities. I pay attention to everything else because everybody else is looking at the bike facilities. That's not what I'm going to look at. So I want to look at these other factors. When we look at conflict frequency, there are a lot more commercial driveways on a typical Orlando street than there are in Amsterdam. There, commercial access tends to be on the side streets rather than having, you know, parking lot entrances, right? Motor vehicle volumes. Here, you know, we're looking at 30 to 50,000 cars per day on our arterials. There, most of the roads are under 20,000. The highest ADT I could find was 25,000 cars per day. Motor vehicle speeds, we have our arterials mostly posted in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range. There, it's a citywide limit of 30 miles per hour, with their neighborhood streets being lower than that at 20 miles per hour. Bicyclist direction, how many cyclists are going with or against the flow of traffic? Here, it's pretty much 50-50. There, because the bicycle volumes are so high, it's almost impossible to ride facing traffic because you've got a steady flow of other bicyclists coming head on at you who are cussing you out every couple minutes, every couple of seconds, I should say. Bicycle speed is about the same in both places. Lateral position is also about the same. I mean, here, again, most of the cyclists are on the sidewalk and most of the cyclists on our separated facility. When it comes to visibility, American cyclists a lot more inconsistent as to how good they are at having lights and reflectors. In the Netherlands, you are required to have a light and a headlight and tail light on your bike, period, any time of day. Doesn't mean the light has to be on, but the bicycle has to have it equipped and attached at all times. And so they're much more stringent about that. And so to me, these are the factors that really explain, especially the ones that are highlighted, I should say, are the ones that explain why Amsterdam has such lower bicycle crash and fatality numbers, especially the fatality numbers, you know, because it's much lower amount of traffic speed.
My experience there has been the bicyclists and the pedestrians are the ones who are crashing. Dealing with us, it was probably 3 times just crossing the street.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, if you're a pedestrian in Amsterdam, you really have to have your head on a swivel because you step into the bike lane, you're going to hear about it real quick. This is just an interesting little example, something I've happened to see on social media. I was talking earlier about the near miss analysis that we're going to be doing with Seminole County using AI. Well, here's a low-tech version of that. Can you see the indicator of the near misses? Right, all those skid marks in the bike lane. And this is basically the problem here is that we would never set up car lanes this way, right? With two adjacent lanes having the option of if either one, going straight or going right. But that's basically what a bike lane does. And the problem is that it works all right with pedestrians because they're only moving 3 to 6 feet per second. Right? And they don't need a whole lot of stopping distance. But when you have a bicyclist going, 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, we're looking at 12 to 30 feet per second and a lot more stopping distance. And so when the motorist fails to yield right of way, that's the situation. That yellow line is where I, as a highly experienced cyclist, that's where I would be. Except that if I was out there, I'd probably be getting harassed by the motorist because I'm not in the bikeway that I'm supposed to be on. That's sort of bringing it back to, again, my perspective compared to the general planning perspective. So key points I think that would take away is that I think increased cycling is primarily a land use and demographics issue with geography. I don't really see a whole lot of impact with the addition of bikeways. Bicyclist crashes, has to do with conflict points, bicyclist direction, speed and darkness if we're looking at severe crashes. And the speed and lateral position is a really important relationship for cyclists to understand so that they can be effective when they're out there. And again, I don't see a whole lot of impact with the implementation of bikeways. So I hope I was able to distill that down. I think I came in pretty good on time. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I too had a paper out. Probably a couple of years. And this is great. Now, I felt like it was safer back then, even though there was not that much information to share and educate the audience with, maybe because of the phones and the distractions. And I'm going to put a question to this. Is any bicyclists, you have data of people on phones on bikes or distracted by phones while they're
The cyclists themselves being distracted?
Because now they have a lot of the
It does show up a little bit, but I think it's kind of an overrated factor. And I think it's also kind of overrated from the motorist distraction standpoint. I mean, like I was saying, I'm the cyclist that oddball cyclist that you see who's riding out in the center of the lane on the road. And I've been doing that for 30 years, well before the advent of cell phones. I haven't experienced any change. And that's because I think even a distracted driver has at least a minimal amount of attention directly in front of them, because that's where their focus has to be. And so that's where I am. And that's why I don't have any trouble. It's the cyclists who are off to the side who are going to have problems because they're not relevant anymore and they're outside of the scanning range of where a driver is.
Thank you.
Mayor Henson?
Yeah, Mike, I participated in the Bike 5 Cities, as you know. And we had it in my group, we had a lady that had an accident.
Heard about that.
And the accident was in Maitland, as in front of a school. And as a result of a gap in the sidewalk. I don't know if you followed up on that but there was probably a 4-inch gap in the sidewalk where they put an addendum to a 4-foot sidewalk. They put like a 2-foot addendum to it, and there was a gap between what was there and the addendum that they put in. The lady's tire got caught in it, flipped her. She cracked a rib and lacerated a liver. And so I'm hoping that you're coordinating with Bike Walk Central Florida with this information. The ride captain didn't have a safety briefing before the ride. So I've got some discussions to have with Emily on ways to improve that, but you know, I'm an avid cyclist. I ride at least 10 miles a day, so I appreciate what your presentation is.
Thank you. Well, to your point about that, when we look at hospital emergency room and hospital admission data, 2 out of 3 bicyclist hospital admissions, so serious enough to warrant being admitted, do not involve an automobile. So to your point, issues like that, whether it's surface hazards, obstacles, mechanical issues, or just poor bike handling skills, colliding with other cyclists, all those can result in significant injury.
Commissioner Sackett?
Yes, we ride the bikes all the time, gone to Minneapolis and like in Amsterdam, I've been there as well and seen the bikes and things like that. I have 3 e-bikes and I have a e-scooter. And I notice more problems with e-bikes in cars than I do with regular bicycles in cars. Because the e-bikes tend to do a burst of speed when you least expect it. Is any data starting to look at e-bikes? They go 20 miles an hour plus.
Yes, I've got some preliminary, I don't have detailed data. I did kind of a sample of this year's crashes and prior to COVID, it was, less than 1% of our crashes involved e-bikes. Now it's up to 26%.
Okay.
This gets back to bicycle speed, right? That the faster the cyclist, the more braking distance they need. And if they're on the sidewalk or in a bike lane or along the edge and a motorist cuts them off, they need a lot more stopping distance.
Right, but they also tend to use a burst of speed. I find when
Sure.
they are in confrontation with a turning, that they'll think they can get across there faster.
Right.
I had a situation in St. Paul, Minneapolis area where I was with my e-bikes. I drove them up there and went up a side road, hit one of those troughs, spaces type things, fell off the e-bike, and there was a lady standing there with a rifle, aimed right at me. She said, "This is my road, get off." And I'm glad I had an e-bike. I could get out of there quick. All right. But it's just that burst of speed that I'm
Right.
seeing is the problem. Also, the sidewalks that are in many towns have trees that overgrow towards the sidewalks. And so the bikes have to, regular bike or e-bike has to go out and around in the grass. And that's when they tend to tip over.
Mhm.
And that's a problem as well.
Maybe next year we'll have something.
Something on e-bike.
Yes, by next year, I will have some good detailed data on e-bikes. University of Florida is updating the bicycle crash typing module in the Signal 4 system. And so we'll be able to give you much more detailed information on how the e-bike crashes happen compared to regular bikes.
Anyone else? Commissioner Sullivan?
Thank you. Mike, this is tremendous. I really like your presentation. One of the things, the vehicle speeds are drastically different in our metropolitan area in Amsterdam. Does anybody here drive the speed limit if it's 20 or 25 miles an hour? And I think generally the honest answer would be no. We drive 30 or 35. Is there anything they do in Amsterdam to control the speed of vehicles that's different from our area?
Well, yeah, it really comes back to land use. All right, when you saw the photos there, when your buildings are right up at the back of the sidewalk and you have a narrow street to begin with, that creates a sense of confinement. When you have shorter blocks, there's all these different factors that come into play that we struggle with because we've built everything to be set back away from the road, whether it's a suburban home or a commercial development with a big parking lot out front. So that really makes it difficult for us to manage speed. Whereas in Europe, it's sort of built in, and it made it, they had lower speeds to begin with, so it was easier for them to manage down.
All right, any others? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we are coming to the end of presentations. We have Rethink Your Commute program. Ms. Santiago, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Santiago. I'm the passenger operations supervisor for FDOT District 5, and I'm also the project manager for Rethink Your Commute. So today we'll kind of just let you know who we are, what we do, and how we're doing. So Rethink Your Commute was created and is a program of the Florida Department of Transportation. And we are around because years ago, the DOT created a TDM policy where it says that we have to consider TDM in all studies, plans, and programs. So Rethink Your Commute encourages and promotes modes of transportation to give people options so that they can consider reducing single occupancy vehicles. So our main focus is to reduce traffic congestion. And to do that, we promote the other modes of transportation to provide those options for commuters. So to do that, we have a mobile app. Most like everyone else has a mobile app. And we use our mobile app so that we can allow people to do ride matching and find, you know, carpools, van pools, maybe how to ride a bus, or maybe how to commute with others by bike. We also utilize partnerships with employers so that we can help enter more people into the rideshare database and possibly find better matches for people to know who in their company they can carpool or vanpool with. And when we partner with employers, we hope that they allow us to go into their their work site and promote our services there. And while we're there, we'll promote incentives for commuters like reimbursable rides program, which if you're carpooling and you're, you know, entering your rideshare data into our database, you have this incentive program where it allows you to go home if you have an emergency. We'll reimburse the ride for like a Lyft or an Uber or whoever takes you home. So there's a lot of reasons to work with Rethink Your Commute. These are just a few of the ones that we have listed. A lot of times employers just kind of want to have a larger pool of employees that they can recruit from. And since we're a program of the DOT, we'll provide our consulting services for free. So for the cost of free, we will help employers find a champion within their organization so that they can help us with maybe email blasts and electronic marketing, like sending newsletters. We also provide promotional posters and rack cards and things that will allow employees to access the information at their work site. So these are some of the employers that we work with. These are just a few of the big ones. We have a lot smaller employers that we also work with. Since we have so many people to reach, we decided to make it easy for employers by having just one contact, and we divided our district into 3 regions so that again, to make it easier for the employers. And we, again, promote things like biking, carpooling, riding the train, riding transit, or whatever options are available in the area. Lately, we've been promoting the Employee Pass program that allows employees to take money out of their paychecks to pay for things like the train or their van pool, or even transit from their paychecks before taxes are taken out, and it saves the employee money. And we also promote with Rethink the Best Workplaces for Commuters program, which is an incentive program for employers so that they could feel good about promoting these transportation options to their employees. And then these are just some of the events or pictures of the events that we kind of did in the previous years, just to give you a flavor of how those things kind of go. We work a lot with stakeholders. So these are just a few of those. We work with MPOs, TPOs, transit agency partners, and social interest groups like Bike Walk Central Florida and the Bicycling Association. We have a lot of reasons that we would coordinate with the MPOs and TPOs. We have a lot of goals in common. So we try to do things like share data and metrics, collaborate our public outreach, maybe share performance indicators and stuff like that. So what do we get for the money? The FDOT funds this program, as I've said. So right now up to now we have over 16,000 people registered and utilize our database. We have a 64% match ratio if you want to find a carpool match. In fiscal year 24, we reduced over 1.2 million vehicle miles traveled, and we also reduced over 66,000 single occupancy vehicle trips. And as I've said, we do a lot of community events, a lot of employer events. So last year we met with 120, we had 120 employer meetings and over 20 outreach events. And all that data wouldn't be possible if people weren't logging their trips, right? So last year in fiscal year 24, we had 74,011 people log their trips. And the bulk of those trips were transit riders. And that was followed by carpoolers at 26%. And something that is of note is that we do have a drive alone section because we are promoting these options. They are options, and we have to be realistic that you might not be able to ride the bus, 5 days a week. So we want to get people used to just logging your trips so that we kind of know how we're doing and how the program is helping people, right? So we have a drive alone option available so that people can log their trip 5 days a week. And that counts obviously the trips that they do with either their carpool or their train pass, and also their drive alone trip that they might have to do 2 or 3 times a week. So moving on to our strategic plan, everything that we do with Rethink, it doesn't happen by accident, right? So we have to really plan for what it is that we're doing. And we decided to develop a strategic plan and kind of model it a little bit after what our transit agencies do with transit development plans. And we wanted to make it a kind of a live plan, right? We wanted to have annual updates. We wanted to have a 10-year outlook, and we have we're going to have a major update every 5 years. We also wanted to ensure that we had good collaboration with our partners. So we developed our mission, vision, and goals, right? So our mission statement kind of comprises everything that Rethink is, right? So it's to help people make informed decisions on how, when, and where they travel by promoting travel choices, connecting people to local resources, and supporting access to transportation options for all commuters. So to develop this plan, we had to look at a lot of data throughout our whole 9-county area. And to keep us organized, we created this dashboard that is actually available to any of our stakeholders. So if you wanted to have access to this, we will stay after the meeting. Just let us know if you would like access to this. So a lot of what Rethink Your Commute does is do promotions, right? So we want to, leave posters behind so that our employers can promote the different options that are available in the area. So we try to make these posters and our different promotional items kind of have a certain look that will inspire confidence and possibly action. So this is what our retro look campaign looks like. We also try to make these posters to where the background could potentially be changed and be utilized in different areas of the district. So for example, the lady that's looking out the window, she's in a bus looking at a space shuttle launch. We utilize the same marketing for a billboard that we have in the Claremont Park and Ride lot. And instead of a background where she's looking at a space shuttle launch, she's looking at a seaplane because Lake County is the seaplane capital of the world. We also do videos in case there's a mode that we want to feature on a specific time frame. This one happened to be the Cranes Ride autonomous vehicle that's available in Altamont Springs. So rethinking the future, we want to continue to promote our services to employers, and we want to continue our partnerships with social interest groups and the MPOs and the TPOs, and promote our employee pass program, as well as expand the options for all commuters. This is my contact information, and I actually brought one of our boots on the ground people with me, Teresa Horan Muller, and we're welcoming any questions that you may have, and that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. I have one of those. What's your biggest obstacle you think for the carpooling? Because I think today everybody likes to be pretty independent and not depend or have someone depend upon them.
I think the biggest obstacle that people bring up is having an emergency and having to go home, which is why we have the reimbursable rides program. So that was specifically a program to kind of get rid of that obstacle. Another obstacle that is around is, or that we hear a lot is if people have kids and they have to take their kids, right? And as I said, these are only options to hopefully reduce or alleviate traffic congestion. So if people can't, do it because maybe they have carpool, for their kids that day or whatever, you don't have to do it 5 days a week. So those are the biggest ones I've kind of heard.
All right, very good. Anyone else? All right, thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
You have a great rest of your day. All right, we are on general information. There are several items under general information, tab 5 for your agenda packets. Please mark your calendar. Let's see, November 13th, Metro Plan Orlando Board meeting has been canceled. And then the next board meeting will be Wednesday, December 11th at 9 a.m. Our next MAC meeting is December 5th, 9:30. At this time, do we have any committee members want to make any final comments? All right, seeing none. Public comments. If there are any members of the public wish to comment, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll unmute your mic. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comment to 2 minutes. Do we have anyone join us virtually?
Mr. Chairman, we have Miss Joanne Canellis who would like to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Please state your name and your address in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, this is Joanne Canellis. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Cool. Anyways, I'm Joanne Canellis, 324 Claremont Avenue, Lake Mary, Florida, 32746. Yes, we do need the bus on Lake Mary Boulevard, first of all, on Sundays and holidays, and late nights, please. And because had to save my money, I couldn't ride a train except for twice a week, because Tuesday and Friday, I don't even ride the train. I'm sorry, because
You
of
came into
my...
the sounds of Joanne Canellis.
And we need to still need the transportation 24 hours, 7 days, every 15 minutes, so that no one will be, like stranded like we are now. And we need a bus at Country Club Road right here, and a bus stop over at Estelle Avenue, Estelle Road, next to the lake in Lake Mary, Florida. And that's Country Club Avenue. We need a bus at Lake Mary Prep School, and we need the bus at the Oviedo Boulevard by the swimming pool that I've been swimming at, but the big kahuna and even a little kahuna as well. So I don't have to walk as much, and I don't get sick to my stomach either. I hurt my leg when I'm trying to walk back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne.
You're
Lake Mary,
welcome.
Commissioner Smith, you have a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
Are there
she
any
has
other?
a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments online?
No further comments online.
All right. With that, I think we've come to the end. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor, say aye. All right. Have a great day, everybody.